This is my bar quilt design, and I'm going to show you how I made it. It's a whole cloth quilt. Some also refer to it as a cheater quilt. In my Spoonflower shop, I have several whole cloth quilt top designs. The link is in the description. This design works best with 1 yard of the Spoonflower organic cotton sateen fabric. That will give you the entire design panel, which makes a 36 by 56 throw size quilt. Since I made it as a baby quilt, I wanted a snuggly and tactile element, so I'm using 100% cotton flannel for the backing fabric. Then I'm using 100% cotton for the quilt batting. I pre-washed and ironed my fabrics, but I didn't pre-wash my batting. I like that cotton quilt kind of puckers after you wash it. My table isn't big enough to baste a quilt on, so I do it on the floor. My flannel backing fabric is about 2 to 4 inches larger than my quilt top, and my batting is about 1 to 2 inches larger. I spent some time getting the fabrics and the grain direction lined up evenly. Once they were, I used my fingertips to smooth it out until I didn't feel any noticeable bumps or wrinkles. I used safety pins to hold the sandwich together. I know that a lot of people like to use a basting spray, but I rather not add any additional chemicals in. For this design, I decided to machine quilt straight lines down where the colors meet. Before starting a big project, I like to give my sewing machine an oil change. Machinery needs to be tended to keep it in good working order, and this is how I do that on my Bernina B335. Check out your user manual to see how to maintain your machine. It's a good habit to get into to keep it running smoothly. For machine quilting straight lines, I always use a walking foot. A walking foot is an essential tool because it moves the top and bottom fabric at the same rate. If you don't use a walking foot for machine quilting, your quilt top will shift significantly. I rolled up one end of the fabric to fit through the throat of my machine, and I continually smooth the quilt sandwich as I sew, feeling for any lumps or wrinkles. I started sewing from the middle out to the edge, and I'm sewing the same direction each time rather than turning the quilt around. I find that doing it this way prevents creating diagonal wrinkles between the lines of stitching. At about a quarter of the way through, I took up the safety pins, smoothed, and repinned it. That way I can correct if there's been any shifting of the fabric, which can cause weird bunching. After finishing the first half, I again rebased the other half. This time, it's even more critical to correct the fabric shifting because I'm going to change the direction I'm sewing. This is also why I make the backing and the batting larger. The fabric can shift a bit, so that excess is important. I mentioned earlier that these are sometimes called cheater quilts, but really a quilt is just 2 layers of cloth with batting in between that's held together with ties or stitching. Sewing through the 3 layers is what's considered quilting. It might be more accurate to call it a cheater patchwork quilt. With patchwork quilts, the quilt top is comprised of small bits of fabric and were originally created to make full use of scraps. Though modern patchwork quilts are often made from new fabric purchased to create a specific design. This particular design was created to mimic a patchwork quilt, but this method is far less wasteful than creating a patchwork quilt out of new fabric. I've been interested in designing modern, whole fabric quilt tops that don't conform to patchwork traditions. I have a few already in my Spoonflower shop, and there will be more to come. After I finish quilting, I trim the excess. I just pick the side that seems the straightest and line my ruler up with the edge of the quilt top and trim that side. To cut a 90-degree corner, I use the grid on my mat. I align my cut edge with one of the lines on the mat. Then I align the top of my ruler with the parallel line on the grid. I like to hang my ruler off about 1 inch so I can check the alignment on both the grid and the quilt. To cut a straight line without using the grid, I leave about 4 inches overlap when I move my ruler. That way I can align that part of the ruler with the edge of the area just cut. I continue cutting all the way around in this manner until I have a nicely trimmed quilt. Coming soon will be a video on how I make continuous bias strip and do the binding on a quilt, as well as some more whole cloth quilt designs. So be sure to subscribe so you can get notified when those are posted. Thanks for watching.